What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk about who's under the most pressure going into the NBA playoffs this year. With the regular season having just about a month left, there has been a large increase in playoff discourse. People are talking about who the favorites are, who they think is going to win it all, who maybe some dark horses are, but maybe most of all, who is under a lot of pressure, who has to go ahead and get it done this year or make some type of deep playoff run, or else it could be really drastic for the franchise. So thinking about that discourse that I've been seeing, as well as getting inspired from a Numbers on the Board podcast episode recently, which shout out to my guys, they're killing it over there, I decided it would be fun to go ahead and make a full video talking about where I'm ranking teams in terms of pressure on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the least and 10 being the most. The teams we're going to use for this are the top 10 teams over in the West and the top 8 in the East. I didn't want to go too much further than that because I think those are the teams that most people care about at this point in terms of actual playoff contention and potential for success. So we're going to talk about those 18 teams. If you have thoughts about anybody else, go ahead and let me know down below. Also, if your favorite team is in this group, let me know how much pressure you think they're under going into the playoffs, who's under the most pressure. And as always, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Let's go and get into the list. First up, we've got the Denver Nuggets, and for them, I think I'm going to put them at like a 7. I don't believe there's a ton of pressure surrounding Denver, mainly because they won a finals last year. Say this core fell apart in the NBA finals, they lost to Miami or lost in the conference finals or like the second round or something, then I think there's a bit more pressure because now there's a lot of questions surrounding their viability to win a championship, but we know this team can get it done. It's been proven, they've done it. And even if they don't win this year, like say they bow out in the conference finals to a really tough Western Conference opponent because the West is really deep, it's not the end of the world. Next year, they'll still have Jokic, Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. Like, their core's wrapped up long term. This is a team that's going to be a juggernaut for a while. Really, the only reason I think there is pressure is because they're the 1 seed. They've got probably the best player in the world in Jokic, and they're most people's pick to come out of the Western Conference. So, being the defending champs, there's a bit of a target on your back. There is some type of pressure, but I really don't think it's anything too substantial. For the Oklahoma City Thunder, I'm going to put them at like a 4 or 5. I guess I'll go with a 5. There is some pressure because they're maybe going to end up being the 1 seed in Shea's and MVP talks, but this is their first time being back to the playoffs. They are way ahead of schedule. Almost nobody thought they were going to be battling for the 1 seed at this point in the season. They've surpassed most people's expectations. I, again, think there's pressure because they're one of the top teams in the West, but if you ask a lot of people, they're saying, oh, I don't think the Thunder are going to go that far, even though me as a Thunder fan, I don't think they're getting enough credit, and I do think they could make a run to a conference finals or maybe even the NBA finals, but if they end up bowing out in the second round, I'm not too concerned. They're very young, one of the youngest teams in the NBA, have 1 billion draft picks going forward, and their core pieces are here for the long haul. So even though I would like to see the Thunder have some type of success, and I think they can, if they didn't have a ton this year, it's not really that big of a deal, and they'll just go into next year with another year of experience under their belts and probably better than ever. Following them up, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are a bit of a weird case. If Cat was fully healthy, I think I'd put them at a 9 or an 8, but because of the Cat injury, I'm going to put them at a 7. I just don't know how fairly we can judge this team if they go into the playoffs being injured. Say Cat's not back yet, or even if he does return, is he going to be at 100%? Because that injury is one that is probably going to take a lot out of him. There's some rehab involved. I just worry about that Cat situation. Now, he's really important to what they do, and say they go into the playoffs this year and disappoint. If they were fully healthy, that would probably lead to the Timberwolves brass saying, okay, we have to shake something up, whether it's trading Cat, it's trading Gobert, it's moving around some of the supporting pieces. But if they disappoint this year, they can point to the fact that Cat was injured as one of the big factors to why they didn't succeed. Of course, maybe Cat is, going off and they still end up losing. That could be a different story. But because of the Cat injury, I think the pressure is down a little bit on the Wolves. But I do still think they're under a good bit of it because they're towards the top of the West. You've got to figure out, is this Cat Gobert thing viable in the playoffs? But also the fact that you've got Anthony Edwards, a young rising superstar for years, under contract at this point. It's not an immense amount of pressure, but the Wolves are definitely a team that has to show some type of promise this year to prevent major changes in the offseason. Speaking of teams that have to show promise, the Clippers to me are a 10. This team may be under the most pressure out of anybody to have success in the playoffs this year. It's do or die time for the Clippers. They've been trying the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George thing for years at this point. They haven't made it to a finals quite yet, despite having those aspirations when they built the duo, and now they've got James Harden here. They've built maybe the best team in Clippers history, a great big 3, a decent enough supporting cast, and at times throughout the season, they've looked like the best team in the NBA. If there's a time they're going to win the finals, it's going to be now. Plus, they're relatively healthy compared to most seasons. Their guys are a little bit banged up like a lot of players across the league are, but there's nothing that's going to keep these guys out of action at the moment. So they may go into the playoffs fully healthy for the first time in a while. They've got maybe the best team they've had yet. Paul George isn't under contract going into next season, so you've got to have some type of success to convince him to stay. Kawhi Leonard and James Harden feel like they're committed long term, but if you fail this season and say Paul George walks, does that commitment maybe wane? They've got to go ahead and get it done. They're under immense pressure. If they don't at the very least make a conference finals run, this team is in a lot of trouble going forward. Next up, we have the Pelicans, and I think I'm going to give them about a 5, kind of similar to what the Thunder are under right now, just because this is the first year that Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson have both been healthy going into a playoff setting, so I'm sure the front office wants to see some type of success, but say they bow out in the first round to one of those top 4 teams, it's probably not the end of the world. They just have to show some type of fight, and I think there's reason to continue to build off this going into next year, keep Ingram and Zion together. Although if they say get swept in the first round or look really disappointing, maybe they could consider trading one of those guys, so that is something to keep on the table. But they're kind of a middle of the pack team. They're still trying to figure out their identity. They've got some young pieces. I think there's still a lot of potential in this squad to be found, so they're not under that much pressure. I'm going to put them at about a 5. Sticking with the 5 section, I'm going to put the Sacramento Kings here as well. I think there's a little bit of pressure because last year they were a 3 seed. They want to build off that a little bit. I don't think people have a lot of expectations, but at the very least, I do want to see that Sabonis and Fox can be a high-level duo in the playoffs. They showed that at times last year against the Warriors, but obviously weren't able to get it done despite being the higher seed and having home court advantage. To me, the Kings are still a piece away. The offseason is more important to them than these upcoming playoffs, but I do want to see them remain somewhat competitive and show some fight, so I'll put them kind of at a 5 here, although it's not a team that I think I'm expecting that much out of. For the Phoenix Suns, though, they're up here nearly at a 10. I think I'm going to put them at a 9, just right below the Clippers, because this is the first full year of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, as well as Bradley Beal. They've dealt with a bunch of injuries, so I think there is some justification if they don't make a deep run that they're dealing with all these injuries all year. They didn't have a lot of time to build chemistry, although to me, if they really flounder in the playoffs, it's a pretty bad sign. You went all in for this trio of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. I was never the biggest fan of the Bradley Beal trade. I kind of came around to it a little bit more as the season started off, but now we're seeing kind of some of the issues where the defense is basically non-existent. The injuries are a problem with all 3 of these guys, and you've got no depth whatsoever. So if they disappoint in the playoffs this year, they don't have a lot of assets to upgrade those guys. They don't have a lot of ways to prevent guys from getting injured. It's just something that is kind of a feature of the roster at this point. This is getting concerning for the Phoenix Suns. They've got to make some type of run this year, and next year, if they don't do anything, is the definition of a 10-level pressure season. Another team that's under a lot of pressure are the Dallas Mavericks. I'm going to put them up here at, I think, an 8. This is mainly because Luka Doncic got a taste of the Western Conference Finals a few years ago. Last year, they missed the playoffs entirely, and this season, they're hovering right around the play-in. If, say, they miss it through the play-in or our first-round exit, do you maybe start to think about Luka Doncic getting unhappy or impatient over there in Dallas? What are the upgrades you make because you don't have a lot of assets in general? You committed to this Luka Doncic-Kyrie Irving duo. You made some moves at the deadline. How do you improve from here? You probably fire Jason Kidd, which I think makes sense. He's a bad coach. But in terms of personnel, what do you do? And again, does Luka get a bit impatient that you're not finding success after making the run a couple of years ago and letting Jalen Brunson walk? Kristaps Porzingis has been great over in Boston as well as Washington. You let him go too. I just wonder if he starts to get a little bit fed up. When you have a guy like Luka who's this generational superstar, you've got to find some type of playoff success to make him happy. If they disappoint again, I think things are going to get a bit tense over there in Dallas. And sticking with high pressure, I think the Lakers I'm going to put at about an 8 as well. They have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. That's really the biggest reason why they have so much pressure. There are a lot of people saying that they could upset a team in the first round if they make it out of the play-in. They've still got all this potential coming into the year. I thought they were championship contenders. I thought they could be one of the top seeds in the West, and it just hasn't really worked out. The team hasn't lived up to expectations. AD's getting a bit older, LeBron's getting older, and he's definitely declining even though he's still one of the best in the world. But also, he's a free agent this upcoming offseason. He could walk to go play with Bronny somewhere else, and then the Lakers are completely screwed. They've got to show some potential this year. They have to make a deep type of run and convince LeBron to stay. I do think it's more likely that he does stay than doesn't, but if, say, they bow out in the first round or don't even make the playoffs, because right now they're at the 9 spot. If they lose a single play-in game, it's over for them. If they don't make the playoffs, I think there's a real world where LeBron walks, and that's a nightmare scenario for the Lakers. Wrapping up the Western Conference, I'm going to put the Warriors at a 7. They're the 10 seed right now. They would have to win 2 play-in games to even make the playoffs, and to be honest, I don't have a lot of expectations for them. The supporting cast around Steph just isn't great right now. Clay is not really himself anymore. It's mostly young players. To me, this has been kind of a transition season for the Warriors where they're trying to find a new identity. And going to the offseason is where things become more important. There is still pressure because you've got Steph, Clay, Draymond. You've shown what you can do in the past. And a lot of people still believe in this team. Plus, with Clay being a free agent, you got to figure out, is this something that's going to work? How much are willing to pay him in the offseason? So there are things that I do think cause pressure, and just being the Golden State Warriors, you're always going to have that target on your back. But if they disappoint this year, if say they don't end up making the playoffs, I don't think it's the end of the world. They've, regardless of what happens, got to make some type of moves in the offseason to make this thing better because they're not a championship contender. And when you have a talent like Steph, that's really the only thing you need to try and be. For the Boston Celtics, I'm going to go ahead and put them at a 9. There is immense pressure on the Celtics right now to go ahead and get it done. This is the best team they've probably had since they won the title back with KG, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Rondo, all those guys. They've got a superstar in Jason Tatum, a number of all-star caliber players with Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday, and Derek White also have that kind of impact, some solid pieces off the bench. Last year, they were one game away from making the finals, coming back from down 0-3. They've been there before. They've been to a number of conference finals. This is the best chance the Celtics have had by far. And if you ask me, this is easily the best team in the Eastern Conference right now. I think they end up making and winning the finals. So I myself have a bunch of expectations. They've had historic numbers in the regular season. There is immense pressure on them. The only reason I don't think it's a 10 is because, say they lose this year, guys are still young. I think there's still a good chance everybody's back and they're still one of the best teams in the East next season. But there is certainly a lot of pressure on the line for the Celtics, maybe the most out of anybody in the East. Although I do think the Milwaukee Bucks are pretty close. I'm going to put them at a 9, maybe an 8-ish. I'll put them at a 9, actually. It's mainly because this team is up there in age. Outside of Giannis, Dame's in his early 30s, starting to get to his mid-30s. Chris Middleton's getting up there. Brook Lopez is nearing 40. They don't have a lot of depth. They have no assets really to upgrade this team. It's kind of now or never for the Bucks. Either this season or next year, they've got to get it done. Chris Middleton's body is also seemingly breaking down. He can't avoid injuries. They had a coaching firing midway through the season. It's been a really weird year for them. I do still think this team is capable of making a run to the conference finals, and if they do that and lose to Boston, it's been a perfectly fine season, but they traded for Damian Lillard and gave up literally everything with the goal of winning a championship, getting Dame and Giannis one. So if they're not able to do that this year or next year, it's a complete failure. And this season in particular, they've got to try and make some type of noise to justify this thing even existing in the first place. I guess we'll have to see if they can go ahead and do it and break out of all the weirdness that's happened to them over the course of this season. Next up, we've got Cleveland, and I think I'm going to put them at about a 7. It's not the end of the world if the Cavs don't make a deep run. However, with the Donovan Mitchell situation hanging in the balance, they definitely want to show some type of promise. A lot of reports have come out that Donovan Mitchell may be looking to move on from the Cavs when his contract expires next season, although I've also seen some reports that he's happy there, that he wants to re-sign, and I feel like this is a good spot to stay. I mean, they've got a great young team around him. They can upgrade in a bunch of different ways, so I think leaving the Cavaliers would be a mistake ultimately. However, with those rumors circulating, they want to show some success, specifically after last year they completely bombed when they got to the playoffs. I think this Cavs team is better and has a lot more potential, but they've got to show some of that to make sure that Donovan Mitchell is able to see a future for himself here in Cleveland going into next season when the contract is about to expire. Next up, we've got the Knicks, who I think I'm going to slot in here at 6. I'm sure they'd love to build off of their second round appearance last year. I do think they've got conference finals potential because when healthy, to me on paper, they look like the second most complete team in the Eastern Conference, only behind the Celtics. But they've been dealing with so many injuries, whether it's Randall's shoulder or OG dealing with, I think it was an elbow injury. Mitchell Robinson's been out for a while. Brunson missed some time. This team's been really beat up. They've made some big trades on the fly, haven't gotten time to put their whole roster together quite yet with OG in the fold, as well as Bojan and Alec Burks, who they traded for at the deadline. So if they bow out in like the first or second round again, I'm not too concerned about the Knicks. I think this is more so a building year where next season could be the year where we really have to see some success for them, or else maybe they have to make some type of major changes. And I could even see in this offseason using their assets that they still have at their disposal, making another big time acquisition, which could ramp up the pressure a little bit. But for now, I don't think there's that much pressure on the Knicks. If we really want to talk about no expectations, the Magic to me are a 1. I have no expectations, no pressure whatsoever on the Magic. They can just go out there and have fun. If they win a couple of games, awesome. If they win a series, it would be incredible, like a home run season. And honestly, it already is. The fact that they're in the fight for home court advantage in the first round is a really promising sign for the Magic. They're still really young. They're still trying to figure out this team. Paolo's a rising all-star. Franz is going to keep getting better. Jalen Suggs is coming to his own. This has already been a wildly successful season for the Magic. Anything they do in the playoffs is just icing on the cake. Also with pretty low pressure are the Indiana Pacers. I'm going to put them at a Between a 3 and a 4. I think I'll go with a 3 for them. They're also really young like the Magic. They're just kind of happy to be here. I'm sure they would like to see a bit more success with the Pascal Siakam acquisition. And if they lose in the first round, they're not going to be nearly as ecstatic as the Magic are, but it is still a young team. This is going to be their return to the playoffs for the first time in a little while. So whatever they really do, I think is perfectly fine. They've just got to show Siakam enough to convince him to re-sign, although I don't think they make that trade if they're not confident he's already going to do so. I think he is going to be back. And next year with a full year of Siakam, Halliburton, and any other moves they make in the offseason, that's when the pressure ramps up a little bit. For now, I think the Pacers are just kind of a fun story, and if they give someone a competitive first-round series, that's perfectly fine. For the Miami Heat, I'm going to put them at a 7 like a lot of these other squads. They're just a team that has built up their own pressure and expectations because they did the impossible last year. A lot of people believe in them now. They've made a bunch of conference finals, NBA finals, and Jimmy Butler is getting up there in age. He's still really good, and I don't think he's regressing anytime soon, but he is a slowly ticking clock. You have to play to his timeline. You've got to try and do stuff while he's still in his prime. So every single year, I think there is some pressure in Miami. Plus, again, just with the fact that they've been so successful the past few years, there's that built-in expectation for them. But I don't think they're going to do a ton this season. I just think the East is too deep. If they're first or an exit, I honestly wouldn't be surprised. And finally, for the Philadelphia 76ers, I'm going to put them here at a 6. If Embiid were healthy, they would probably be more like an 8 or a 9, maybe more like a 7, depending on how the year went up to this point. But his injury has just thrown a wrench into the whole season. They've drastically fallen down the standings since he got hurt. Felt like he was going to run away with the MVP. He is the only reason why this team really worked as well as it did. They really need him back. And if he comes back, I do still think the Sixers have potential to make some type of noise and be a bit of an upset threat in the playoffs. But even when he does come back, I doubt he's going to be 100% at the level he was before the injury after not playing for months. So to me, this feels like it's just kind of a lost season for the Sixers. There is pressure with having Embiid on your roster and the fact that they haven't really done anything so far in the playoffs. But if they face like Boston the first round, I don't think anybody's expecting them to win. To me, whatever they do in this upcoming offseason to put help around Embiid and Maxey is much more important. And it's just a shame that this season was kind of wasted. One that Embiid was really dominating in before the injury. But yeah, with all that being said, that's my gauge on every team's pressure going into the playoffs at this point. Let me know down below in the comments what I got right, what I got wrong, and how are you feeling about your favorite team going into the home stretch of the season. Also, if there are any of these other like ranking type of videos you want to see me make, let me know down below too, because I really enjoy doing these. I like getting to talk about a bunch of different teams in the same video. It's a fun way to keep up with the league as a whole. But yeah, appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I'll see y'all later. Real one, stay back.